Hello and welcome to the Coach on the Couch podcast with your hosts, Martin Fleming and Edward Bates. This fortnightly podcast covers various topics relating to subjects from career and work, health, nutrition and well-being to parenting, relationships, and much more. Each episode will deal with a particular area of these. So if you are interested in learning and hearing different thoughts, ideas, and even get some tips or helpful suggestions on these areas of life, or perhaps you are into self-development, then we hope you will stay with us and hopefully enjoy a fun, insightful, and what we hope will be an interesting discussion for you.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Coach on the Couch. On this episode, I will be joined by Edward Bates and we're going to be discussing all about difference and whether that's a good or a bad thing, or whether difference isn't either one of those, and whether we can strive for both aspects of it. So I hope you enjoy the discussion and get something from today's episode. So with that being said, let's go straight into it.
Hi, can you hear me all right? Well, absolutely. And I do think difference is a good theme, by the way. I listened back to the message yesterday.
But yeah, so
it's nice to hear Steve on the last one. I've been looking forward to this.
So difference then. So
well, I was thinking.
So what's your thoughts on difference then?
I think what I wanted to talk about was there are certain times where it's good to be different, and where it can be a bit more of a problem. So I wanted to talk about the good and bad bits of that, but focusing on the positives. Like, for example, I mean, I know we're not going to make it all about sight loss, but talk about like where it's got me. Like, because sometimes I have done different things, and that's been quite a good thing. And not all of that is down to sight.
So even if it's not sight loss, right? Even, I mean, again, just in the general term of disability, I mean, this was kind of something I was going to kind of, I suppose, mention later on. I've got other aspects in mind as well, but as we're on that, then we'll start that from that direction type of thing. Yeah. And so I was, one of the things I was thinking about difference is obviously, is it again, there's that whole question around, is it good or is it bad, right? And it's like it's when it comes to disability, I think it's a bit of a contradiction in terms, right? Because if you think about it, we strive, and we've there's been campaigning for
years
for equality, right? To be treated as equal as everyone else. Well, but then they go on about being different, right? So it's like, but you can't be different, but want to be the same as everyone else.
Well, exactly.
So it's different, do you want to be different, or do you want to be the same as everyone else and treated the same as everyone else? So what is it? Is it better to be different, or is it better to be,
I think it depends on the situation that you're in. So I think if you're in school, for example, like I would have hated to have been treated differently when I was younger.
Uh-huh.
But as I got older, there was something about it for me that I quite liked being different. And my peers, my peers never gave me any stick about this, I was lucky. I felt like I didn't have to impress them or feel worried about being different, because nobody was giving me any sort of hard times about it.
But again, as a teenager, again, is it not a contradiction, right? So when you're dealing with adolescence and that kind of thing, we often talk about when you get to teenage, that they're looking for, they're seeking their own, for their own individual identity, right?
Yeah.
So that's trying to look and develop yourself as an individual and then a separate identity. However, most teenagers don't want to be singled out. They'd rather be part of a group, or
Exactly.
they follow a certain fashion, or they want to be in the in crowd or whatever. It's like, so, well, how you can't, again, is it like, why are you going to be, how are you going to be finding a completely individual and self identity if you're then going to identify with something else?
I think this is a very interesting question that you raise. I think if when I think about my identity, like, I don't remember thinking one day, right, this is me, this is how I want to be. I think there were. This is hard. I think there were times when I was really young. I look back on things that I did, and I was a very different child to how I am now, which is obviously understandable because I've grown up and I've seen the world and I've done a lot of different things. And when I look back at the videos I have seen of me, I was a very nervous child, anxious child. I look back at it and I think, well, actually, it saddens me when I look back at it because that's not me. I don't believe it's me, and I think, like, I pushed myself to get away from that side of it because I didn't want to be like that. I didn't want to be like that sort of very quiet person. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to be out there.
But is that to do with difference, or is that just to do with maturity? And
I think it's both. I think partly it's because I'm growing up, and I know there's part of me that knows how I should be in the big world, but also a part of me that didn't really like what I saw when I look back at those videos, and I was quite shocked by that, and a real effort to get away. I mean, I'll ask you, Martin, when you were growing up, I mean, what did you think about being so-called different? I mean, everybody's different. Nobody's the same. But what did you think about it?
I obviously went to a school specifically for blind and kind of low vision and stuff. So we were all in the same boat there. So in some ways, when I was at school, there wasn't any difference because we were all the same, right? So
yeah.
So again, you know, that's a different type of difference. It's so yeah. So but as a teenager, I suppose you again, I wanted to be like other teenagers, but then I couldn't be.
I was going to say, how did you know that?
I felt restrictive because I boarded at school, so I didn't have the kind of community, the people like in my home area that I, to go out with, or and then I, with the low vision, I wasn't always aware of what was popular or whatever. And music, yeah, I'd know, and you liked your, certain types of stuff, but in terms of clothes or that, and so I tend to end up kind of relying on what my, either what my brother had and would give me or whatever, or would say, kind of suggest or whatever, that kind of thing, or or I'd, there'd be people at school that would have more vision than me, so you'd kind of rely on their kind of fashion sense or something like that. So I think as just kind of wanting to be a normal teenager as well, that was kind of a bit awkward, and I think it kind of you felt restricted because of some of the difference that you do have, even though you didn't want it to be a big part of anything. I suppose my biggest experience with not wanting to be different related to my vision and being in school was and my school obviously were more aware of it than I was, but I was this kind of teenagers, like how they are, and we you don't want to be told anything, so they felt that my vision had dropped and I wasn't so they wanted me to start using a long cane, which I don't really want to get into too much description about that, because obviously in terms of people listening to this who wouldn't know what that is, there's obviously, as you know, Ed, there's like different types of white canes. So
navigational aids, I think we call them.
And obviously the long cane's the one that people who have no vision would use for mobility. But then you used to, I don't know if they do them now, because it seems to go from either a long cane to the identity canes and not anything in between anymore. But they used to have what they called a guide cane, and the guide cane was something that was between the two. So you always used it. You used it for more for protection when you were out. So you didn't. You held it across the body and you held it away from you slightly. So if you did hit something, you had that, kind of time to respond or whatever.
Yeah.
But you weren't arcing it like you do with a long cane. So it wasn't quite as heavy as a long cane, but it's not as light as an identity cane, or what they used to call a symbol cane back in the day. And I used to use a guide cane, and they wanted me to go onto a long cane, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And I just felt it was kind of, it was all that kind of image thing, and the whole, I was happy as I was, and I didn't think I'd lost any, my vision was still stable or whatever. Anyway, so because I was the rebellious teenager, the school decided that I wasn't going to have any more mobility until I decided to use a long cane. So for quite a few years, until about my last year in school, I didn't have any mobility. And in the school I was in, in the school,
how many years are we talking?
So that would have been, what would I have been? I think I was in third year, so I would have been about 13. So I would have been at what I'd done almost all my mobility routes from school, apart from this one that I would have had left, which would have then qualified me. What the school used to have is these 6 main routes that you used to do. They take you out of school and you do all these routes in a local area and do these different things. And Route 6 was kind of, you had to travel around London and come back and all that, using various different types of transport. And then that allowed you to get permission from your parents for them to allow you out when you're at school during the week. So you could go out in the evening or whatever, that kind of thing. And if I'd just gone onto a long cane, I would have been the youngest one to have been able to have done the Route 6, I think, because I was up at Route 6 by the time I was 13. But then I rebelled, and it wasn't until my last year, I had about 2 weeks at the end of my school that I was able to go out and whatever, because I finished my stuff and I had about 2 weeks left of school.
Wow. So you
so
really,
so
you
I,
really did go for
I
it.
shot myself in the foot, really, because I didn't have that freedom. I couldn't go out and about, and I couldn't. So
So that must have made it harder, though, when you did leave school and go into, dare I say it, the big wide world. Now, did you notice the so-called difference that we're talking about? Did you feel more different after you left school?
well, you see, by that time, I had to use a lot in cane. You see, so so as I say, I did do it in school and stuff like that. And then when I left, my vision was dropping really rapidly. So, and then I went to college in Hereford. So I was away, and I had some mobility there, but my cane technique and my, once you kind of just learn where certain things were, I mean, unless you really needed mobility, they only gave you so much, and then that was it. You were kind of off you go, like. So,
Wow. Yeah.
And then obviously going backwards and forth, like holidays or whatever, going home and going to school, then at college, meant using trains anyway. So I mean, you kind of you're pretty much kind of, your independence grows anyway, and you're pretty good at that. But I've always been quite a confident traveler and kind of quite a confident person with a cane anyway as well. So the difference, I mean, that was a very obvious difference from that point of view, and it almost makes you resent having that visual thing, especially when you're a teenager, where you just want to, do teenagery things type of thing, and you want that independence, you want that freedom and stuff. And then obviously I kind of stopped myself from getting that. But if I was who I, if I was then who I am now, I would have just gone with it, even if I didn't agree with it, just so I could have got it done. And then I could just go out and do things how I wanted once I was out.
That's all about maturing,
but
isn't it?
I didn't think of it in that way, you see.
But, see, I think for me, I think I went to a mainstream school, and my sight never did change.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, like, I had to go onto a cane from a young age. And I think I've realised if I wanted to get anywhere, then I would have to crack on with it. It wasn't like I was being compliant, but I just didn't like the idea of never being able to get anywhere myself.
Mm.
And
I see all this kind of struggle with difference. I mean, we're still on this whole thing of with relating it to
we should move it on.
Vision or disability. But I see that with my son now. Like, I mean, I was saying to you before we kind of started about how he's got a magnifier and all that, and he won't kind of use that, but he uses other resources in school and supports that he's used to from a younger age. So stuff he's used to, he's still happy to use, but it's like the fact that he's going into high school next year and he's not happy because he's not going to the school where majority of the people who are in his year are going.
That
So
is going to be hard.
It's like so he, he's that age where he wants to be with his friends. Doesn't matter whether the school's better or not. He wants to be part of that. However, he also knows he's got other needs and he's kind of different in certain ways. So it's that, what, and especially for him, what's kind of, is it good or bad to be different? Because he knows he's got needs, but then he's not, he wants to be with all his friends in a school that may not meet everything that, we need, we want for him and stuff like that. So yeah, I kind of, again, you see that whole struggle with being, is difference a good thing, or should you be part of something? And again, it's what's, sometimes you hear people always go, oh yeah, I like to be different, or but then you face them with other situations, and they're not happy being on the outside of something. So it's like, when people say they like, okay, there probably is extremes, but I don't think many people just want to be purely different and kind of unique or individual, whatever, just out on their own. To
So
some degree, they still want to be, you know, it's like if you've got people want to be, you know, as I say, there's this thing of kind of wanting to be different or whatever, but then you've got this kind of either, is this one better than me, or is that better than that? And I want to go with the most, you know, even whether it's companies or businesses, whatever, it's like, oh, I want to go to the most popular or the best service company or whatever. So if everyone else is going to it, then you're likely to go with them. Because it's like, it's a bit like recommendation, you know, we go by recommendation. So the more people who recommend something doesn't necessarily mean the business is any better than another business. I mean, another business that's not got as many testimonials or whatever might still be just as good. But because we've heard this one and that one go raving on about, you know, whoever it is, we'll go with that. So we don't want to be different in that way. We want to go with what we know, or what we think we know.
You've got to be a very kind of sort of strong person to want to do something different. It's all well and good saying it, but to actually see it through, I think it's a different thing.
And that's another thing, you see, is it that, like, is it that in a lot of cases, although we want to be different, this sounds really contradictory as well. So we want to be different, but we don't, because now this is a slightly another kind of topic, but that we're scared, we're frightened of change. Is it that we're kind of frightened of being different?
I think. Well, are you asking me to ask that, or is that just a rhetorical question?
Well, a bit of both, I suppose.
I mean, a lot of people don't like change. I mean, I'm not great with change, and I don't know many people who. Some people can really do it, but you've got to be prepared for it, and you've got to embrace it if you're going to do that. I mean, that probably is a topic for another day.
But difference comes into a lot of change. That's what I'm saying. I think there's an element of change in there, because if to be different, it's like, you know, go from one. It's like when people talk about don't bring stuff from a past relationship to another relationship or whatever, because, you know, every relationship you have is going to be different.
Absolutely.
But then, like, we also there's a lot of times we can't help but bring certain stuff with us, and you know, we're not always who we truly are at the beginning of a relationship, because we're always trying to impress and all that kind of stuff, which is all kind of, again, and other topics and other things that could be taken from that for other episodes. But I think it's like, again, things are different, but that's why sometimes in some situations they don't always work out, because they're too different for us, and people are different. So
sorry, and the same with work as well. You know, people go into work. I mean, so I've been at the same place for a fair while, but I've had a number of different jobs. And even though I work for the same association, there are still things that I have to do that are different, and I have to check myself on, do you know, I say quite a regular basis, and think, you know, like, I compare things to what used to happen when I first started there, and that's fine. You don't want to forget the past, but I sometimes have to remind myself and other people that, you know, this time has gone. You're in this position now. It's different. It's different because I'm in a different part of an organization, but also, like, the world has changed in how people work, and you do have to roll with it. It doesn't mean you forget your past, or people do try and forget their past. I know, you know, some people want, but you know, you do have to move forward with it, don't you?
So picking up on a point there, like you said about comparing. So again, you know, when we compare though, like, we're comparing, it's almost essentially implying that difference is bad,
yes,
we're scared of difference again because we're comparing. Now, if we compare, then we're saying, well, what's better, what's worse. Now, there's an example I had just recently with that. I was in a governor's meeting the other day, and they were talking about the new way that they assess handwriting. Now, this is a very visual method, but
Okay, yeah.
which I
I'm interested by where this is going.
It's a system that they're it's not only at this particular school, so it's not like just a local thing. It's a national. And I said, yeah, and I raised the fact that it's another system that's been produced, another method that's actually a very visual method. And I said, what happens if you've got like a teacher with visual impairments in the school? And I said, they're not going to be able to do it, because the assessment is required by all staff in a school.
But why do they have to assess people on that at school?
So there's the handwriting. They assess their handwriting to say whether it's, the handwriting's good or not. So in the past, you had a grading system, and they used to mark, like what they call marking and stuff, and they'd grade how good. Now, what their argument is that's very subjective, because it depends on who's doing the marking and who's if they're going to favour you or not, or who's whatever. So, so what they do is they take two bits of to kind of keep the whole description a bit shorter and kind of not go into too much about it. But what they do is they kind of show you two pieces of handwriting by the children, and then you say you then decide which one's the better handwriting, and that way then and as I say, all the staff in the school, all the teaching staff, whatever in the school, they all have to do that with the same two bits of work, and that's where you then get this weighting, you get this kind of scale or whatever, and then it's decided on which one's the better piece. Now, some are more obvious than others, because some people have really bad, and it's going to be really obvious, but some are very close. So then you have to kind of think about, well, have they used their punctuation properly, or that kind of stuff, or whatever. So there's other things that then you can kind of bring into it, but the point is that you're comparing again. So it's like, so we're essentially then saying that difference isn't good.
No, we're not. And to me, it seems a shame if you're at school, because I mean, I know that they have to do it, but it seems to me there's always everyone's always assessed on that, and very few other ways of being assessed, like on how you might speak, how you might perform, how you might communicate.
And it's all, and that's all about being different. It's all about but then schools also teach the whole, especially in recent time, more holistic stuff, and saying, well, it's good to be, and embracing inclusion and diversity and stuff, and saying, well, it's good to be different. But then hang on, you're now, but in schools and in academia, you're assessing or setting exams and saying, well, you're different to that one because you only get this grade, or you only get that grade, or.
But is that because that's a system that and let's just be clear about this. I mean, I was terrible with writing at school, but that wasn't due to my sight loss. That was because I didn't enjoy writing. I'd have much rather spoken or recorded a message on a tape, as it was back then, because I thought I came across a lot better. But is that happening now in the world just because it's easy for everybody to just be treated as one? If they change the system, they would probably say,
I think of course there's to do with systems, and it brings in other aspects, but just looking at it as a difference thing, I mean, I think, well, we're on one hand we're telling people it's all right to be different, and we're trying to embrace diversity or whatever, but then we're putting children or people through tests and things to and actually making them different. So on one hand we're saying it's fine, and the other one we're saying no, you've got to be like everyone else.
That's really, I mean, okay, this is quite interesting. The thing is, though, this is happening in all forms of life.
Yeah.
People are saying that things will change. I mean, think of what, like for example, like governments or councils or
you look at communism. That's how communism was based on.
Well,
everyone was going to be equal. But how can you have? But it never works in practice because you always have to have someone in charge. So you know, you can't all be the same.
Because if you didn't have anyone in charge, nothing would necessarily get done. You'd all be floundering around. So, Martin, if you were, you know, putting your hat on as a business coach, I come to you and I say to you, I want to be different, but I'm nervous about doing it in my field of work or in my life. What would you say?
So what I mean, obviously can't get into a whole coaching thing with you, but
obviously no. I'm just giving you an example.
My approach with you would be to look at what is different about you, what's unique within you as a person, a characteristic, or and how you do your, you know, if it was business, if you had your own business, and you know, what is it? How do you run that business? What's your philosophies? What's your ethos? And you know, those sort of things. Within a work situation, as in say like career coaching, again, I'd say, okay, you know, there's aspects of what things you can't change. You've got to work within the organization's policies, procedures, whatever. But what makes you that role? What can you make that role fit around you and be, you know, unless the organization, the organizational's values and ethos is completely different to your own. This is why as a coach, I'm a coach that works very much on beliefs and values and beliefs and feelings and that kind of thing. So I one of the first things I always work with people on is things like beliefs and values, because if you're in an organization where that conflicts with your own beliefs and values, then you're never going to be happy in the job you're in. So if you but if that's not the case and you're happy, you know, you're generally happy, but you're just, there's something not quite right about the role, you can't put your finger on it, and it's like, you know, it just something doesn't feel right, then that's where I would start. And I'd say, you know, and then we would look at how can you make that role fit around you. And sometimes we take on roles that have been you've inherited from other people, and other people have made a name for themselves, and it's very hard to break that mold.
But that can happen in all sorts of walks of life.
But you've got to take on that thing and kind of make it your own. So so in that sense, you see, so like the way I work that, so then that means that I'm advocating to be different. I'm advocating for you to be different. I'm advocating for you to and encouraging you to look at your uniqueness. But at the same time, see, it's almost like a double thing there, because as I say, it's like sometimes it can still be contradictory, because what I'm also working on is the fact that you've still got to work within organizational procedures and processes. So you've still got to do some of these things, whether you like it or not, because that's the job you're in, or you've got to do things in a certain way because you're, you know, so, but it's how can you change some of that to make it fit for, you know, or how can you do your role in a way that makes you feel happier or whatever? Or is there things that you can delegate to other people that you're not happy about, and that way then you don't have to worry about it and you can mold the role to fit you anyway? So it depends on where the seniority lies and you know, that kind of stuff. So
that's very hard though for people who are like up top in a big company, like you talk about the seniority,
but that's why a lot of those really could do and do need like coaching and stuff, and coaches, their own coaches, because if you're at the top, you have no one else to talk to.
No.
So
no, I see that
it's a very, very positive thing for organizational leaders to actually have that person that they can go to and throw ideas out or say how they're feeling, what's going on, and see how they can kind of move forwards with stuff. It's slightly different when you've got people further down the hierarchy or whatever, because they might have other people on either on that level or that kind of a thing.
I think the problem is, though, you see, again, I'm not trying to argue with it. I think the thing is, because say if somebody's running a successful business and the money's coming in,
mm-hmm.
Why change? They would say. I mean, it's not the right answer, but it's convinced. It must be quite difficult.
Why do something different? Well, sometimes you have to, as you said really early on. Sometimes you have to change with the times as well. So you might not being different or not doing something different can be also where you're in a rut, you're in your own comfort zone, you refuse to move. That will then destroy either a company or it could hamper your own development because you just stagnate. So if you stagnate, I mean, obviously as a business, then you're not going to keep up with your competitors or anything that's new coming in, and your business will fail. So sometimes you have no option but to do something different. So in other organizations, doing something different means diversifying and adding extra business to your portfolio, so it can be a positive thing that way as well. If difference within business only, well, I won't say only, doesn't only work out, but won't work out in some respects if you don't do enough research and you don't know what you're doing. If you just decide to do something different and you've not researched whether it's going to work or you haven't looked into it, then of course you're at a risk, and that's a bit of a dangerous
Very
thing
rarely
to do.
does that work.
So,
very rarely does that work for anybody, that method. I think a lot of it is just giving things a go. I think moving with the times, as you said earlier on, is something that makes a huge difference. I know of people, I'm thinking of musicians who've done it. I'm thinking of sports, football managers who've rebuilt teams. And they've had to, okay, so you can say, well, they're doing the same job. They're rebuilding a team. Yes, they are rebuilding. But each individual on that team is different. So therefore, than the member before. So therefore, you have to change how you manage them because each person on that team will want different support. I'm reading a book now about somebody who's gone into football management and how he had to change for, first of all, the clubs, because the directors, I mean, obviously football's a very, very big sport now, but when he was managing 20, 30 years ago, there was a lot less money in the sport. There was a lot less that you could do. And now it's such a global game that depending on where you are in the football league structure, owners, directors have different ways of doing things. See, I feel like you're trapped even more, really, because the expectation is so high on you, and yet you've still got to manage the in charge of as well as having to deal with the owners and directors above you. So how do you manage that? When you've got lots of people pushing you in different directions, how can you be different but yet remain the same when you've got that happening?
Yeah, very true. That's all to do with obviously different management styles or different even management in general has changed over the years as well, from a kind of you just do as we say to a more kind of either coaching and mentoring styles and that kind of thing. So I mean that can be quite challenging, and I think it is quite challenging for a lot of managerial people or managers and stuff. And even within football teams, right? You look at that again, we've got a contradiction in terms for difference, because you've got people who they're looked at as being, oh yeah, this person's very talented, this, that, whatever. But then you've got to work together as a team. So that then means you've got to fit into the team somehow. So the dynamic is still one of kind of, you've got to fit. So
and in a team environment, there's not one.
Because otherwise, if you do your own thing and you just go off and be different, it's not going to work because you're not interacting or you're not collaborating with the rest of your team. So although they go, oh yeah, this player is a really talented and good player, and he's got this talent and that, and that's kind of, his difference or his uniqueness. But then you've got to kind of rein that in to some degree, because you've got to find the way of channeling that uniqueness or those talents to work within a team. So
I think what we're finding from this is very different. It's very difficult to be different, but
and we seem to. I think the other thing I'm taking from this, and or is becoming obvious, is that I think we seem to strive for both.
We do. I mean,
but it's do we always get it right, marrying it together?
I mean, I think you can look at that in a number of different ways. I think sometimes early on, but it's not going right. But it might take you, like you said with your thing about when you're at college, you didn't want to be different for years and you had to use the cane. It can take years to realise that. There are things that I've done and I look back and I think, I wish I'd done this back then, or I wish I'd had the guts to do this back then. That could have made things very different.
So again, I suppose, is it awareness and experience that gives us that ability to embrace difference more? Because when we're younger, do we want to probably be more part of something than as we get older and we know our own abilities, our own experiences, or our own traits and characteristics or whatever?
I think it's partly that, and I think it's, I mean, obviously, like I say to people in the work I do, everybody's an individual. And I see that in the way, you're different to me. But again, I'm going to say it feels like we're striving to be different, and yet there's still things that neither of us will probably want to change. I think it's a very interesting one, and I think it's an unusual one because I've never really considered it before. But
that's the joy of these episodes. That's the point of these episodes, to give some thought and some perspective to things. Sometimes, and like with a lot of these, they cross over with other things, and I sometimes we don't always look at things individually and kind of see where, how some of this affects us and stuff like that, because then it verges on other things, such as, like we were saying, difference can bring in the whole fear of change and that kind of thing. Or you could bring difference into, whether you like attachment or not, and all that. So it can overlap with other things. And the great thing with doing these episodes is that I tend to just pick a topic to kind of want to deal with, and you can really explore some of that without kind of making it too complicated and stuff like that, if you understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely, it's keeping it simple and keeping it to the point.
For the particular episode, I don't think there's anything right or wrong about difference. I think in terms of coming to a conclusion or coming, winding the episode up a bit for people, is there's no specific advice on this episode. I don't think. I think it's I feel it's more awareness of difference, and I think the only bit of recommendation I'd have on that would be that before we kind of start shouting about either kind of wanting to, have equality or have this, or even, I'm an individual or whatever. So just to think of, well, what is it that you really want? Is it to be part of something, or is it that you really want to have, to be individual, and to what degree do you want that difference in individuality? Because we as we say, we're striving for both, or we but sometimes we shout more for one than the other, and then we forget that if we have more of one, we're going to lose the other, if you know what I mean. So
And there's nothing wrong with changing your mind either, I would say.
No, and I think again, I think we start to get to know what we really want as over time with experience and life experience and stuff, and as you mature and things like that. So I just I wanted to do different, and I just wanted to bring that awareness to people and kind of the whole philosophy around that, and hopefully it's gonna aid people in kind of when they're dealing with other people as well or whatever, to just think about how other people are responding to things as well, so that you can kind of manage that side of things. We spoke about managers and things. So if you're in a work situation, if you're dealing with someone who's either rebelling about something or they're I mean we just kind of to end on or almost end on another example. I mean, we're seeing all the stuff about strikes at the moment and everything. That's, if you think about that, that's all about being, difference and want, but then also wanting the same. So they're all striking, because of more money, or I know there's a lot more. It's a lot more complex than just difference. But if you just look at the kind of one of the fundamentals to that, it's like, within an industry you'll have different pay scales, but then they're all striking because they all want better money. So it's like they all want the same thing, but then they also want to be different. So again, there's difference there. Now, as I say, it's a lot more complicated situation than that, but just on that basic point. So but yeah, I hope the episode was, and what we've discussed today is helpful for people. And I don't know if you have anything further to add to anyone.
No, nice to be back again as the non-business coach in this pair. I'd always say that I would never give any opinions because I'm not trained to do that. But hopefully, Martin, it was good to have another person to bounce ideas off, and hope to be back again before too long.
Thanks very much for your time again, Ed. And I'll be back again with another episode soon.
Thanks, Martin. Bye for now.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome back to the outro section. And in today's episode, we discussed all about difference and whether it actually is good or whether it, that it's bad, because we're often encouraged to be different and to embrace difference, or and be unique. But at the same time, a lot of us, and in a lot of stages of life, we seek inclusion. We seek to be part of things and to not stand out, not be unique or individual or that kind of a thing. We look to be either as a team or be part of something. So we explored all of that and found several different times and examples of when difference is very prominent and when it affects us either negatively or positively. And I think there was a lot of other things we could have mentioned and we could have gone into, but obviously we would have been going for a lot longer, and we can always do another episode exploring and extending upon that. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode and got something from it, some perspectives or something to think about. There wasn't any specific advice really, just more to do with awareness and kind of looking at the difference and whether it's always a good thing or not. And if we're trying to one thing, that are we going to be giving up another, and that kind of a thing. So it was more to do with awareness, and no particular advice in this episode, but I hope it was enjoyable and you got something from it and found it interesting. So we'll be back again very shortly with another episode. So until then, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the fortnightly Coach on the Couch podcast with your hosts, Martin Fleming and Edward Bates. You can find this podcast on all the major platforms, including our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@coachonthecouch2. You can leave comments and feedback on either the Anchor platform or our YouTube channel. You can contact us by emailing coachonthecouch22@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to being with you soon.